very, like quite often, that he loved his wives. I think it was like a test, he said.
It wasn't even a full sentence. It started small. "This is my story too," Meri said during her interview with Grace Lovely. But within minutes, the internet was ablaze. Hashtags surged, Reddit threads ballooned, YouTube commentary exploded. People weren't just listening, they were feeling. She had finally said it. Kody didn't want her. Not in secret, not with compassion, but with blunt indifference. "You can stick around," he said. "You can come visit me and Robyn and the kids. But we're never going to have a marriage relationship anymore." It was like being told, "You can watch the life you built from the sidelines." Chapter 2. 30 years of Almost Meri had been there since the beginning. The first wife, the foundation. The loyal partner who helped build a family from a dream, one that was already complicated before it even began. But for over 3 decades, Meri learned to survive on crumbs. Every birthday party she planned, every family meeting she attended, every smile she offered through gritted teeth, all came from a woman who stayed. Not because she wasn't hurting, but because, in her heart, she still believed she mattered. And perhaps that was the deepest betrayal of all. Chapter 3. The other side of loyalty as the years passed. Christine and Janelle found their voices. Christine left first, not just physically, but emotionally. She stood in her truth, told the world about her heartbreak, and began anew. Fans applauded her strength. Janelle followed, not in Christine's footsteps, but in her own defiant, quiet storm. She didn't cry for the camera. She fought for her children, for her peace. But Meri, she stayed. She held her tongue when Kody married Robyn. She stayed silent when Robyn became the favorite. She swallowed her pride when her own child's identity became public and Kody shrunk back into the shadows, and still she stayed. Chapter 4. The public cracks by the time Meri finally spoke. It wasn't shocking because of what she said. It was shocking because she had finally said anything. She admitted Kody told her there was no future, no marriage, no hope. He wasn't just indifferent. He was final. Fans weren't just upset. They were devastated. The comment sections filled with pleas, questions, and rage. After all she did for him, why is she still protecting him? He discarded her, like she meant nothing. One comment summed up the heartbreak perfectly. "You don't spend 30 years building a house only to be told you're not welcome in it." Chapter 5. The silence that cut deeper than words. What stung the most wasn't just Kody's rejection. It was Meri's refusal to tell the whole truth. Some said she was protecting her dignity. Others believed she was still protecting him. The very man who once called her the cornerstone of the family had now told her to fade into the background. And Robyn, who once cried about being accepted, stood by as Meri was cast out like yesterday's news. When fans looked at Meri's silence, they didn't see strength. They saw suffering. They saw a woman who had been emotionally discarded and yet refused to make anyone else uncomfortable by telling her truth. Chapter 6. What didn't she say? While Christine gave interviews about the emotional manipulation she endured, and Janelle publicly called out the favoritism and neglect, Meri remained poised, controlled, cautious. She didn't name names. She didn't accuse. She didn't expose. And that made people furious. Because silence, in this case, wasn't interpreted as grace. It was seen as complicity. The same viewers who once begged her to walk away now demanded, "Why won't you just say it?" Chapter 7. The layers beneath. But it's never that simple, is it? What if Meri wasn't staying silent out of fear but out of trauma? What if she'd spent so many years minimizing her pain that now speaking up felt like betrayal to herself? Because to speak the truth means acknowledging how long you ignored it. And for Meri, maybe that was the scariest part. This wasn't just about Kody. It was about every moment she ignored her own gut, every time she accepted less, every time she smiled through it. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to look in that mirror yet. Chapter 8. The audience turns, but the internet isn't patient. Within hours of Meri's live interview, creators uploaded takedowns. TikTok analysts dissected her tone. Headlines screamed betrayal. Meri defends Kody again. Why is Meri still protecting Robyn? Meri's silence is deafening. People no longer saw her as a victim, they saw her as part of the problem. Forgot that healing looks different for everyone. That speaking your truth is a muscle, not a button. And that sometimes the person you have to confront isn't your ex, it's yourself. Chapter 9. Was she ever loved? This is the question that haunts so many fans. Did Kody ever love Meri? Was it real? Or was she just the first step on a journey toward someone else? There's a clip from Sister Wives, Buried, deep in the seasons, where Kody calls Meri my first and only legal wife. He says it with nostalgia. But now, looking back, it sounds more like a checkbox. Was she a partner? Or just a foundation stone? Chapter 10. When silence becomes. Survival Meri isn't stupid. She knows what people are saying. She sees the comments. She feels the heat. But here's what most don't realize. Some survivors of emotional neglect don't scream when they're hurt. They shrink. They isolate. They convince themselves it's their fault. They internalize the rejection until their silence becomes armor. And for Meri, that armor kept her functioning for 30 years. It protected her from the truth. But now, it's the very thing holding her back. Chapter 11. Healing in reverse. Christine healed by walking away. Janelle healed by speaking up. But Meri, she's healing backwards, starting with silence. Sitting in it, peeling away the layers. Letting herself feel what she numbed for decades. It's slow, it's messy, and it doesn't look like strength. But maybe it's the only way. She knows how. Chapter 12. A woman rebuilding herself today. Meri is more than her silence. She's building businesses, hosting retreats, sharing cryptic, hopeful posts online, smiling more. But behind every photo is a woman who carries ghosts. She doesn't need to expose Kody and Robyn to heal, but fans desperately want her to. 'Cause her story, her full truth, would validate every person who stayed too long, who loved too hard, who believed they weren't enough, and still kept giving. Final chapter. The woman who deserved better, whether Meri ever speaks the full truth or not. One thing is clear. She deserved better. She deserved a husband who fought for her. Family that protected her heart. A storyline that didn't end in silence. But maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning. Because there's a new strength in Meri now. Not the kind that shouts. The kind that survives, that grows, that rebuilds. Piece by trembling piece. Closing narration. She gave 30 years to a man who walked away like it meant nothing. She held her silence while the world begged for truth. She stayed dignified when others turned cold.
Equally,
Try that. I'll tell you what, there's a divine aspect about my relationship with Robyn, and we have been bitch slapped for it.
But
In Flagstaff, nestled in peace and shadow, the Brown family's once shared dream sits untouched. The house Robyn and Kody built figuratively and literally still stands tall, polished, perfect. Untouched by the emotional fire they helped ignite. It's the kind of house that whispers secrets through its pristine walls. And while Meri stands outside that house, emotionally, spiritually, literally, the rest of the world is watching, wondering, hoping that one day she stop, standing at the gate, and finally speak the truth. But instead of a storm, we got silence. Instead of fire, we got calm. And to many, that calm felt like betrayal. Chapter 14. Divorce doesn't mean hate. But what does it mean? When Meri sat down with Grace Lovely and said, divorce doesn't have to mean hate, she may have thought it would read as wisdom, maturity, emotional elevation. Instead, it landed like a gut punch. She likened her position to divorced parents trying not to badmouth each other for the sake of their children, a metaphor that at first glance reads noble, even graceful. But fans didn't hear dignity. They heard silence weaponized. They didn't hear healing. They heard protection for the very people who hurt her. It wasn't just what she said, it was what she didn't say again. Chapter 15. The free pass with every polished phrase and carefully measured word. It became harder to believe that Meri was just trying to move on, because every time she avoided naming names, every time she refused to call out the very public harm Kody's rejection, Robyn's takeover, that emotional starvation, what fans saw was not strength. It was silence that gave Kody and Robyn a free pass, a forgiveness they never earned. And for fans who had stood by her side, who wept through her heartbreak, who waited for her moment to rise, it felt like a betrayal not just of herself, but of them. Chapter 16. And then she said it, but just when the firestorm could not burn any hotter. Meri dropped a line that cracked open the floodgates. Just because I got a divorce doesn't mean I need to spill all the tea. It wasn't the sentence that made jaws drop. It was one word. Need. I don't need to spill all the tea. Not, I don't have tea. Not, there's nothing. To say no, it was need, a word that implied choice. A word that hinted there is more. That if she wanted to, if she felt like it, she could blow the roof off the house. And suddenly, silence wasn't just suspicious. It was strategic. Chapter 17. The backlash begins. The comment sections exploded. Instagram, Reddit, TikTok lit up like kindling. One viewer wrote, "Meri just confirmed what we've all known. She's sitting on a mountain of secrets." Another said, "This isn't about healing anymore. This is about control. If you've got something to say, say it." And a third cut even deeper. "She's still in their thrall. They broke her, and she still won't break free." It wasn't just disappointment now. It was emotional whiplash. The fans who rooted for her are now the ones shouting into the void. Why won't she rise like Christine? Why won't she fight like Janelle? Chapter 18. The echo of rejection, but maybe they've forgotten one thing. Meri wasn't just discarded. She was erased. Slowly, quietly. While the world watched, Kody removed her from the center of his life like deleting an old file. Robyn smiled, Kody justified, and Meri always. She made herself smaller and smaller until even her voice was a whisper. To find that voice again takes more than a camera. It takes more than an audience. It takes courage that may still be waking up inside her. Chapter 19. The performance of peace. Every time Meri posts a motivational quote, every time she speaks about boundaries, healing, and letting go, it's easy to believe she's finally at peace. But peace isn't always honest. Sometimes it's armor. Because when you've been hurt enough times, you learn to wrap your wounds in wisdom-sounding phrases so people stop poking at them. And Meri, she's mastered that art. The problem is fans can see through it now. They don't want sound bites. They want truth. Chapter 20. The ghost of Robyn. No matter how hard Meri tries to pivot the conversation, Robyn's shadow looms. She was the favorite wife, the legally married one who claimed to love all the wives while reaping every benefit. And yet, when Meri speaks about keeping her silence, it often sounds like she's still protecting Robyn, or at least refusing to confront her. Why? Is there a hidden relationship still there? Does she fear Robyn's retaliation? Or is she simply not ready to admit that the woman she once welcomed into her family was the one who helped push her out of it? Chapter 21. Stockholm speculation, and now the whispers are growing louder. Stockholm Syndrome, it sounds harsh. But for many watching, that's the only explanation that makes sense. Why else would a woman so obviously hurt continue to show restraint? Why else would someone with every reason to expose the truth still hold back? Fans are split, but they are united in one conclusion. Meri knows more than she's telling. Chapter 22. When Oops isn't innocent. In the middle of her polished performance, Meri chuckled. Oops, did I just say that? She was referencing past interviews, moments where she slipped, where she said something raw, to honest. She laughed, shrugged it off. But fans didn't laugh, because in this world, oops isn't cute. It's a clue. It's a crack in the wall. And now everyone is leaning in, watching, waiting, hoping that just once she let the whole truth slip out. Chapter 23. The fragile mirror. There's a kind of pain that comes from not just being betrayed, but from betraying yourself by staying silent. And Meri, she's still standing in front of that mirror, trying to reconcile the woman who stayed quiet to keep the peace with the woman who wants to scream into the night, I was hurt, I was used, and I was abandoned. But every time she opens her mouth, she sees that mirror crack just a little more. And she's afraid that if she speaks, it might shatter completely. Chapter 24. Turning on the audience, then came the moment no one saw coming. When Meri finally spoke, not to Kody, not to Robyn, but to us, the viewers, the fans, the supporters. She said in a soft but steady voice, I'm not keeping quiet to protect someone. I'm doing it because I choose to. It's my line. And just like that, the room froze. Because now she wasn't being silenced. She was choosing silence. And that somehow made the betrayal sting even more. Chapter 25. The disconnect. To Meri, it sounded like empowerment. To fans, it sounded like dismissal. After everything, after the tears, the neglect, the decades of quiet suffering, they weren't asking for revenge. They were asking for truth. And now they're asking, has Meri become the unreliable narrator of her own story? Chapter 26. What is she saving? The final question echoes louder than all the rest. What is Meri saving? Her peace, her image, her business? Or is it just the last piece of herself she still has control over? Whatever it is, whatever she's hiding or holding on to, it's costing her the very thing she thought she had earned. Her voice. Closing chapter. The truth. That refuses to die in the end. Maybe Meri will never spill the tea. Maybe she'll never confirm what the fans already believe to be true. But the thing about truth, it doesn't need an invitation. It waits. It seeps through the cracks. And one day, whether through an interview, a slip, a confession, or a camera, that didn't cut into me will come out. And when it does, we'll know. That silence was never just about peace. It was about pain. And Meri Brown, whether she speaks or not, has already told us everything we need to know. Meri Brown once stood at the center of a reality TV phenomenon. Millions watched her build a life in a plural marriage, smile through heartbreak, and stand beside a man who no longer stood beside her. But now she's silent. And that silence, it's louder than any word she's ever said. I'm not going to cross it just because the internet is throwing a tantrum. I don't believe I need to spill all the tea just because I'm getting a divorce, Meri once said. It wasn't just a statement. It was a mic drop. In that moment, she stopped being the woman left behind and became the woman in charge. Longer broken, no longer pitied. But powerful because she chose silence not from fear, but to protect her peace. Yet that silence shook fans more than a loud tell-all ever could. For over a decade, viewers watched her suffer. They saw her husband, Kody, withdraw. They watched Robyn rise as the favored wife, subtly, sometimes not so subtly, replacing Meri's position in the family. The distance was sharp. The dismissiveness was painful. There were episodes that made people cry for her. And then nothing. No emotional outbursts, no public breakdowns, just silence. At first, that quiet felt noble. Then it started to feel like denial. Because when someone says, I'm not protecting them, it makes you wonder then, who is she protecting? Fans have memories. Sharp ones. They remember the moment Kody said he no longer considered himself married to Meri. They remember Robyn's soft-spoken words and strategic tears. They remember the loneliness, the longing in Meri's eyes. And when she walked away without calling anyone out, fans were confused. They were upset. They were heartbroken for her hand, maybe even a little. Mad at her. Why won't she speak? Why won't she name the pain? And why, for all that she's endured, does she still seem to be shielding someone? That's when the whispers began. And those whispers had a name, Jen Sullivan. To most of the world, Jen is just Meri's best friend. But to those who followed Meri's journey closely, Jen is much more than that. She's Meri's anchor, her safe place, the one constant in a life filled with chaos and rejection. They run businesses together, they travel, they laugh, they cry. They live life like sisters bound not by blood, but by choice. When Meri was supposed to move to New York, her fresh start, her big leap forward, she paused. She had plans. Real. Ones she had been apartment hunting, dreaming of dating again, ready to shed the skin of the first wife and become simply Meri. And then came the diagnosis. Jen's husband was diagnosed with sarcoma, a rare and aggressive cancer. It moved fast. It struck hard. Surgeries followed, removing massive tumors. The pain was brutal, the journey unbearable. Jen's world collapsed, Stan. Meri dropped everything. No announcement. No look at me post, just love. Meri canceled her move, stayed in Utah, cooked meals, attended appointments, and simply sat beside Jen through the storm. She didn't make it about herself. She made it about love. That's Meri. She doesn't scream for attention. She shows up always. And suddenly, her silence around Kody and Robyn made sense in a whole new way. It wasn't fear. It was a pattern. The deep, unwavering loyalty to those she loves. Meri is not the kind of person to burn bridges, even if those bridges led her into fire. She shields. She guards. She holds space even for those who didn't hold it for her. Some say that's misguided. Others call it strength. She doesn't see herself as a victim anymore. Not of Kody, not of Robyn, not even of the media who dissected her every move. And maybe that's why she won't speak. 'Cause to her, they no longer matter. But then, there's still that nagging question. What about the secrets? What about the moments the cameras missed? What about the truths that could shift everything? Insiders whisper that there's more, so much more. There are details Meri has buried deep, not to protect others, but to protect herself. Secrets about how isolated she truly was, about manipulation behind closed doors, about the sacrifices she made to keep her family afloat. And now, with the world watching, she holds those stories like sacred relics, not because they aren't. True, but because they're hers. Meri's choice to stay quiet isn't about submission. It's about sovereignty. She is no longer in a place where her identity is tied to being someone's wife. She's no longer bending to fit a mold someone else created. But in protecting others, including Jen, is she still putting herself last? Is she addicted to sacrifice? Or has she finally given it to someone who deserves it? People close to Meri say this wasn't a hesitation. She didn't freeze. She chose. Chose to stay for Jen. Chose to offer care over chaos. Chose to be present when someone she loves needed her the most. And that choice, pure, selfless, unshaken, speaks louder than any accusation or clapback could. That's why her fans are so torn. On one hand, they see a woman of immense courage. On the other, they worry she's fading behind someone else's emergency again. For years, she sacrificed herself to Kody's warped definition of family. Now, is she doing the same for Jen? Or is this finally a different kind of love? One that isn't conditional. One that isn't hierarchical. One that says, I'll stand with you, no strings attached. In every live stream, every post, every quiet show of love, Meri shows us who she is. Not with flashy revelations or viral sound bites, but with steadfast devotion, with gentleness, with grit. Yes, the fans want answers. Yes, the world craves a Talal. But maybe Meri doesn't owe anyone that. Maybe her silence is her way of saying, I'm done giving them more than they gave me. Maybe she's writing a different story. One not defined by betrayal, but by survival, by friendship, by peace. Still, that doesn't mean the pain isn't there. There are moments when it leaks through. When she talks about the things she's lost. When her voice catches remembering what could have been. When she looks tired. When her eyes shimmer with the weight of everything she's holding back. Because silence can be powerful, but it can also be heavy. And Meri, she's been carrying it for a long time. Maybe the question isn't why she won't talk. Maybe the real question is, why does she feel she still has to carry it all alone? If this is her healing, it's slow and quiet, but it's hers. And maybe, just maybe, that's the loudest statement of all. Meri Brown once stood at the center of a reality TV phenomenon. Millions watched her build a life in a plural marriage, smile through heartbreak, and stand beside a man who no longer stood beside her. But now she's silent. And that silence, it's louder than any words she's ever said. I'm not going to cross it just because the internet is throwing a tantrum. I don't believe I need to spill all the tea just because I'm getting a divorce, Meri once said. It wasn't just a statement, it was a mic drop. In that moment, she stopped being the woman left behind and became the woman in charge. No longer broken, no longer pitied. But powerful because she chose silence not from fear, but to protect her peace. Yet that silence shook fans more than a loud Talal ever could. For over a decade, viewers watched her suffer. They saw her husband, Kody, withdraw. They watched Robyn rise as the favored wife, subtly, sometimes not so subtly, replacing Meri's position in the family. The distance was sharp. The dismissiveness was painful. There were episodes that made people cry for her, and then nothing. No emotional outbursts, no public breakdowns, just silence. At first, that quiet felt noble. Then it started to feel like denial. Because when someone says, I'm not protecting them, it makes you wonder then, who is she protecting? Fans have memories. Sharp ones. They remember the moment Kody said he no longer considered himself married to Meri. They remember Robyn's soft-spoken words and strategic tears. They remember the loneliness, the longing in Meri's eyes. And when she walked away without calling anyone out, fans were confused, they were upset. They were heartbroken for her hand, maybe even a little mad at her. Why won't she speak? Why won't she name the pain? And why, for all that she's endured, does she still seem to be shielding someone? There's sadness, there's fatigue, and perhaps there's guilt. 'Cause along the way, the fans stopped inquiring about Robyn and Kody and started inquiring about Meri herself. And suddenly, the old rumors came back louder than ever. The money, the property, the missing pieces. See, Meri's silence might have been seen as graceful, maybe even admirable if it weren't for the lingering financial questions that swirl around the Brown family. Viewers aren't just wondering how Meri feels anymore. They want numbers, receipts, cold, hard dollar signs. Because the figures, they're impossible to overlook. Robyn and Kody closed out 2024 by finalizing the purchase of a staggering $2.1 million Flagstaff mansion, 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a guest cottage. It's an RV garage that can house 7 cars, and the cherry on top. Spay paid $420,000 in cash as a down payment. And that's when the internet exploded. Where did the money come from? How did two people who spent years complaining about debt, dragging out the Coyote Pass drama, and dodging financial accountability suddenly become real? Estate moguls overnight. And the most damning question of them all, why hasn't Meri said a single word? That's when things started to darken. Because there are fans, diehard ones, who are convinced Meri knows exactly where the money came from. That perhaps some of it didn't just come from equity or savings,